Thank you, Peg. It's wonderful to be here. So when Peg said plenty, the first thing that popped in my head was this scene that I hadn't seen in a really long time. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. It's from the novel Rise the Euphrates. And let's see, the three characters you need to know. The first is the grandmother Cassard, who as a child survived the Armenian genocide. And so she has very strong feelings about her ethnicity. The second character is Araxi, her daughter, who did the one unthinkable thing and married a non-Armenian, whose name is George. And then the third character is the narrator Seta, and in this scene she's 9 years old. I'll lift this up a little bit. Okay. Wholeness, I'm told, comes from within. But that Christmas when I was 9, as we drove in silence from the church to Cousin's bakery, I thought that wholeness was everywhere, but inside us. At the bakery, Dad picked up Cassard's rye bread and rolls, and no one said a word about the hollow ache inside our bellies. No one said a word each time Cassard attacked my parents' marriage, the way a moth attacks wool, making little holes here and there, so that the damage becomes apparent only after it's done. By the time we reached Cassard's house, Poppy and her family had arrived, and we were all supposed to be joyous and happy. Cassard had set the table with Christmas napkins and plates, colored bowls, silver trays, and crystal serving dishes, filled with pickles, beans, scallions, and radishes. The good china plates were laden with roasted lamb and beef, dolma, kibbeh, badijan pie, green beans, mushrooms, and pilav. The adults oohed and awed at the splendor of the feast. Auntie Vart commented on the centerpiece made from pine cones, boughs, and ribbon, but Cassard wrinkled her nose and waved away the praise. Seated at the head of her table, Cassard studied the family gathered about her. There was Mama and Dad, and we 3 kids, Poppy and Great-Uncle Alex and their daughters, Auntie Sarah and Auntie Vart, and their husbands and children. While Cassard surveyed her guests, I observed Uncle Eddie's brother from Russia seated across from me, who at that moment was picking his bulbous nose. Mama saw me staring and fluttered her fingers in front of my face. Cassard waved for Great-Uncle Alex to say the prayer. Great-Uncle Alex bowed his head and mumbled something in Armenian. Van, Melanie, and I caught up in time to say Amen. The women removed the aluminum foil from the platters and served the men, the children, and finally themselves. Everyone knew that Cassard was a great cook, and we heaped food onto our plates as if we would never eat again. We picked up our forks and were about to eat when Mama noticed that Cassard's plate was empty. "What, Meidig? What can I get you?" Mama asked. Cassard shook her head at a spot in the center of the table. "Something from the kitchen? You need salt, pepper?" Cassard pursed her lips and with her chin pointed at the reindeer shakers on the table. Everyone tried to find the one thing Cassard lacked so we could all start eating. "What?" Mama exclaimed. "Meirig, are you sick?" "Was only thinking to myself," Cassard mumbled, her chin resting on her chest, as though she were dozing. Suddenly it bobbed up and she stared at Dad's neck. She smiled, squinting, as though straining to see him. "What?" Mama said, crossing her arms. "What now?" "It's nothing," Cassard assured her, waving at us to begin eating. We picked up our forks again, everyone except Mama. But as we took our first bite, Cassard turned to my brother Van, who was seated on her right, and whispered loud enough so everyone could hear. "I was just thinking to myself, your father must be disappointed we don't serve none of that Episcopalian Jell-O salad." Dad's fist hit the table and the ice in our water glasses chimed. Cassard, startled by the noise, looked up. "Don't you worry, Alraxi," she said. "I know what those Catholics like. I see 'em at the store, buying. Next time," she tapped the side of her head, "next time Myrig remembers, we'll serve 'em Jell-O right on the table, like it was food." Mama straightened the silver beside her plate. There was not a sound in the room. She took in air, then under her breath said quietly, "Enough." Dad combed his fingers through his hair, his face flushed with anger. "You had to spoil it, didn't you?" he said, his lips pressed as though he were about to cry. "Couldn't leave it be, not one holiday." Uncle Eddie cleared his throat. "Hey, George, you catch the Knicks last night?" Mama gave Uncle Eddie a look that left him with his mouth hanging open. "This is supposed to be Christmas," she said, to the fork at the side of her plate. "In other families." Mama lifted her glass from the table and without drinking set it down. She seemed to be concentrating on her breathing as though it required special effort just to keep the air moving in and out. "There's a draft in here," Cassard announced. "Seta, go check the door." "No," Mama said, cutting the air with a finger. "You keep Seta out of this. You're always trying to put her in the middle. There's no draft and you know it." "On my shoulders, I feel blowing." But instead of looking at Mama, Cassard gazed pleadingly at me. "There's no draft," Mama said. She pointed her finger to keep me in my chair. Cassard bit her lip and looked at me, but I avoided her gaze. Staring at my plate, my face burned with shame. When at last I looked up again, I expected to find everybody watching me, but they all had their eyes glued on Cassard, who had begun rubbing her arms in an effort to warm them, and then on Mama, who was concentrating on breathing. We were not a quiet family, and we certainly never shirked a good fight. But the schism that had grown between Mama and Cassard, the thing involving Dad, and I now understood me, was too deep to discuss. It lurked behind the women's dramatic battles and heavy silences. Until that moment, I never knew whose side to be on, Mama and Dad's or Cassard's, since both sides were me. But sitting there, I made a decision. "Mama," I said. Both women looked at me, and when I lifted my eyes to meet Mama's gaze, she inhaled sharply and raised her brows. Then, as though granted permission, she pushed back her chair and headed for the stairs. She returned with Cassard's sweater. "Put it on," she said, dropping it in her mother's lap. Mama took her place at the table and, turning to poor Uncle Eddie, the harmless, declared, "Eddie, I want you to know my husband does not eat Jell-O salad." Van says I remember that Christmas because I was finally old enough to see both halves, Seta and Loon, though they had been obvious to him long before. Later, as we drove home in Dad's new Buick, Mama finally let go of the sorrow she was holding. It came slowly at first, then in a great gush of air. My father steered with one hand and wrapped his free arm around her shoulder. She murmured something to him, something about "so alone." Then she started to sob, while in the back seat, Melanie, Van, and I bit our lips and braced ourselves. Dad glanced at the road and then back at Mama and whispered something we could not hear. A moment passed. Mama's shoulders coughed up and down. She burrowed her face into Dad's wool coat. At the next stoplight, he threw the car into park and kissed her. Again and again, then deeply. He went on kissing her, despite the headlights behind us and then the horns, despite Van, Melanie, and me watching from the back seat. We heard the horns, but more shocking was this kiss, like some miracle. We didn't know what to do except hold our breath and grab hands while the light changed twice more. The light turned a third time before Dad let go of Mama and, putting the Buick back into gear, drove us home through the snowy, silent streets of Memorial. Dad was turning the car into our driveway when Mama peered into the back seat to find Van, Melanie, and me, still stunned by that kiss, still pressing hands. And if someone says Christmas, this is what I see: the look of surprise in my mother's eyes, as if we were her bonus presents, wrapped in muffs and coats and ribbons, as if we were for her, from him, and brand new.